So today I'll be talking about sports psychology and mental health. And what I studied was how sports psychology and psychological factors influence sport and athletic performance. I learned more about how mental health can be affected by sports and how to improve mindset and performance. So why do athletes struggle with mental health, and how can sports psychology help? So some common reasons why athletes struggle with mental health could be getting cut from tryouts or going to a new school or team, mistreatment from teammates or coaches, pressure, performance anxiety, losing a starting position on a team, changing coaches, judgment, major injuries and not being able to continue a sport, and student athletes also can be put at a higher risk of anxiety, depression, and suicidal thoughts than their non-athletic peers. So injury in sports. For most athletes, sports are a frequent hobby. Playing sports has benefits for releasing serotonin and helps with stress, health, and well-being. It's very common for after a big injury, people forget that they're more than just an athlete. There can be a sense of lost and feeling depressed. So as we know, concussions are so harmful for the developing brain and can cause people to have to stop playing. According to the University of Texas Science Center studies, students that have sports-related concussions could be at an increased risk for depression and unfortunately even suicide. Too much pressure on athletes can also lead to downfall. Pressure from all sports can make athletes feel more stress on them to focus more on their sport goals and expectations over their own important needs. Researchers from Ohio State University found that it is hard for athletes to discuss their feelings with their coach because they don't want to show weakness and do not want to be looked at differently as a player. Too much pressure from coaches and parents and teammates can create a lot of anxiety. Overall, there needs to be an increased awareness with anxiety in general, and especially performance anxiety in sports. According to the NCAA website, research shows that almost 85% of certified athletic trainers believe anxiety disorder are currently an issue with student athletes on their campus. An Ohio University research paper, National Federation of State High Schools writes, an estimated 31.9% of today's young people experience some form of anxiety disorder. And also, nationwide studies show that 1 in 5 people age 18 and over experiences a form of mental illness. So I wanted to talk about at the Olympics this year, Simone Biles, the famous gold medalist Olympian, when she backed out of her final competition. This led many people really confused and some even upset. As you can see, there's a lot of hate comments and there's also people supporting her as well. And I thought this is an important example of the stigma around many athletes today. Famous athletes are always getting judged, and this is something that anyone can feel. So in the ESPN article, she says, "You have to be 100% there." She told reporters after the meet, "If not, you get hurt. Today has been really stressful. I was shaking. I couldn't nap. I've never felt like this going into a competition, and I tried to go out and have fun. But once I came out, I was like, no, my mental is not there." So I think this is really important because we need to know as people that we can set our own boundaries, and it's okay to communicate and ask for help, and even the best athletes in the world do this. So why do I care? I am a 3-sport athlete myself, and I've played sports my whole life, and they've been very important to me. I've been on teams where I've strived, and I've also been in team environments that have made me struggle mentally. So I wanted to hand out a survey to student athletes here at Wilson to get people's feedback. I handed out my survey to 5 different sports teams at Wilson that occur in the fall: soccer, cross country, volleyball, field hockey, and the girls hockey team. There was 77 people who responded to my survey over the trimester, and I wanted to gather data from the girls hockey team to represent a winter sport. And many of these athletes could be answering the survey thinking about an experience they had outside of Wilson sport teams, like on a travel or a club team. The survey was designed to ask a few questions in each category, like pregame, during the game, and postgame. So here is the survey I sent out. I asked questions relating to sleep, anxiety, injury, and just emotionally, how athletes feel during their sport. And I know many student athletes outside and here at Wilson who have experienced self-doubt, anxiety, injury, stress, and sometimes even depression, so I wanted to look at data from everyone. So as we all know, sleep is a very important factor to student athletes' success and well-being. Sleep can be seen as a controllable factor, but it's almost nearly impossible for students here at Wilson to get the amount of sleep and recovery rest time that they need. So after I got my data back, I made this graph, and as you can see for never and rarely, which is in blue and orange, that there's a lot of answers here, and the percentages are very high compared to students often or always getting enough sleep. So I wanted to talk about some important data that I found. In total of the 5 sports teams, only about 6% of the cross-country players always get the recommended amount of sleep. On the cross-country team, about 31% reported never getting enough sleep. Whereas on the field hockey, cross-country, soccer, and hockey team, data shows that over 50% never or rarely get enough sleep. Volleyball seems to get the most sleep out of every team because about 70% of them get sometimes or often get enough sleep. So here's all the percentages below, and as you can see, comparing all the numbers, there's a lot of zeros for always, and you can see the percentages get very high around never and rarely. So according to the Children's Hospital in Colorado, Dr. Provance writes, teens need about 9 to 10 hours of sleep every night, and only about 80% of them don't get it. In fact, half of teenagers report feeling tired all day due to their academic and athletic workloads. Young athletes are at increased risk. Sleep impacts everything from health to development, and especially very important for young athletes because it's key to performance. So sleep obviously has a lot of benefits. It reduces risk of diseases, prevents accidents, improves memory, it have you have more energy and healthier heart. So the next one I wanted to look at was people, how they feel with anxiety for their game. And here again, you can see for never and rarely, the percentages are very small. And student athletes are always, often, and always feeling anxious for their games. There's many signs and symptoms of anxiety disorder: feeling apprehensive, powerless, feeling sense of impending danger, constant feeling of panic or doom, feeling increased heart rate, rapid breathing and sweating, and feeling extremely weak or tired. So high percentages of student athletes at Wilson are experiencing anxiety relating to their sport. Field hockey was 100% towards feeling either sometimes, often, or always anxious. No one responded to never or rarely feeling anxious. It's interesting that the hockey team showed that 41% were rarely ever nervous, but 47% feeling anxious often. Data from the soccer team was recorded to be the team with the most anxiety. About 6% reported not feeling anxious, while over 90% said that they were often or always anxious. And here's all the percentages next to each other again, and you can see that a lot of them are always or often feeling anxious. So some common strategies to help anxiety before games could be listening to music, meditation, creating a pregame ritual, or breathing exercises. And this is something that I found really helpful, and I know other people have as well. And then the next question I wanted to look at was, does your self-worth and confidence depend on your performance? And I think this is something that athletes can feel often. And here we have often and always being shown a lot in yellow and blue. And never only has a little bit on the cross-country team, which is good. But it's kind of sad, as you can see, that many people feel that their confidence really depends on the way they perform. So I found it interesting that field hockey reported only sometimes, often, and always feeling that their self-worth is dependent on their performance, whereas over 20% of cross-country reported never or rarely feeling that their confidence depends on their performance, compared to 0% of hockey players for never or rarely. 60% of volleyball players reported that they often or always feel that way, and 61% of hockey players reported that they often and always feel that way. And for soccer, the most, which was 73%, reported that they often or always feel that their confidence relies on the way they perform. And here you can see the percents again. So what can athletes who struggle with their mental health use sports psychology? So the importance of sports psychology is the study of psychological factors and how they influence sports and athletic performance. Sports psychologists help understand how participating in sports can improve health and well-being. So mental skills and sports psychologists help all athletes overcome problems, enhance their performance, and achieve their goals. So Benjamin Thompson was someone who worked at Wilson for the psychological counseling, and he worked with students and athletes, coaches in 2016, and he is currently now a mental skills coach at Smith College, and he has been in this practice for 35 years. So this is his flyer that he sent me when we were exchanging emails, and I had a few questions for him. I wanted to receive answers from a professional so I could help people today. And so I asked, as a mental skills coach, what do you find is most helpful for athletes to practice? He talked about learning to be in the moment, managing nerves and anxiety, dealing with pressure, using mental imagery and visualization, setting both short-term and long-term goals, employing positive self-talk, maintaining focus, resetting after mistakes, and focusing on those things that can be controlled and letting go of the controllables, which is obviously easier said than done, but it was really helpful to be able to connect with him. So I wanted to talk a little bit about visualization imagery, and this is used to build on someone's strengths and help their weaknesses. Imagery helps athletes with anxiety in competitions and helps athletes be confident and focused. Pro athletes have used imagery throughout their whole life as a tool for developing their sport skills, to have a vision of what they would like to achieve. And anyone can use imagery for even daily goals, and I found this very helpful when I started practicing it. And I just also asked him what he does and how it helps athletes better their mindset. And he said in his practice he works in two areas, and that's teaching athletes strategies for improving their mental performance, like mindfulness, using mental imagery, replacing negative thinking with positive self-talk, and learning how to bounce back from mistakes, performing under pressure, etc. And he also helps all athletes who are struggling with any emotional concerns such as depression, anxiety, eating issues, body image, substance misuse, and low self-esteem. All of these problems can affect how an athlete performs in their sport. And he was talking about mindset as well, and he said it's very important to understand that talents are not only inborn, but it can be developed, and to believe that effort is key to mastery, and see failures as opportunities to learn and grow, and just have fun. And I hope that you've taken away the importance of sports psychology and mental health, and learn how you can best support yourself and your teammates or a friend. Thank you.
Questions for Teaghan?
Hi, Teaghan.
Hi.
Good job.
Thank you.
I liked all your data. I wonder if you on purpose chose only girls teams, and if you thought the data would be similar or different for boys.
Yeah, that's a good question. I just thought to do girls teams just because those are teams that I'm on, and I feel like I hear a lot from a lot of the girls teams, but I think it would have been like interesting to take some guy teams to see if it's like different. But basically I just did it because like I know I've heard a lot of you know, people that kind of struggle with some of those things like anxiety or like performance anxiety, so I thought it'd be interesting to see like those teammates or peers and like how they would answer in the survey. But yeah. Yeah.
You mentioned that you're a preseason athlete. Did you ask in your questions if the sport that the athletes are responding to is what they consider their main sport or a secondary sport, or how much they identify with that sport in terms of like its role in their life or playing on multiple teams, things like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So one of my last ones was, do you feel like you are like grouped with your team? And some teams did respond. I wasn't able to show like all of the graphs, but some did respond that they feel like they are like grouped with only that sport, even though like they are 3-sport athletes. And I think like focusing on the fall, just because like we talked about it in class, and we said it might be easiest for people to think of like the sport that they're currently in rather than like one that might be like 2 seasons from now. But there was like some crossover too, because some hockey players also play a lot of fall sports. So there was like different answers there when I handed it to like the same person. Their like results for like the fall sport was a lot different than the winter sport, and I think that depends on like which one they're more focused on. So I found that really interesting too. Oh yeah.
Do you have any advice for coaches?
Yeah, that's a good one. I like hoped like coaches would kind of see that, you know, with the survey that there is a good amount of people that might feel a way that you didn't like realize, just with like things with like performance, or I had like a few questions about like how they emotionally feel after like a game, and like the same thing with like the confidence. And I feel like coaches seeing like those results and a lot of the percents like being like always feeling that way or often feeling that way, maybe will make them like realize that like even the people they might not expect to be feeling like self-doubt and anxiety are. So I think just like looking out for like warning signs as well. But yeah. Yeah.
So are you going to share the presentation with all the coaches of those teams?
Honestly, yeah, I don't see why not. Like I could just show the data because I had like a lot of graphs, but I wasn't able to like show them all. But like a lot of the percents were answered like kind of in like a negative, not like a negative way, but in a way that shows that a lot of people can be like struggling without even knowing. Yeah.
Excellent.
Thank
Thanks,
you.